Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Priceless podcast. Today, with another guest, and we are traveling from Denmark to Hungary to Budapest, where another friend is waiting for me. But before we come to the guest, I would like to welcome you. Thank you for coming back and watching this. My name is Michael Sechen. Please, if you like this podcast, like us, subscribe, and also suggest to others, because that's how the news is spreading the fastest, when we tell the people that are close to us that there is something good in the YouTube market. I hope you agree with me. So also, one thing I need to talk about today is that this is all possible because of the donations of good people. So if you want this to continue, I will need your help. So please consider about sending us donation or becoming a long-term donator. You can find the information in the podcast description or on our webpage, how you can send us your donation, your gift. And also, if we talk about some content where links are available, I will put the links in the podcast description in this video or on your audio podcast, underneath your audio podcast if you're listening the audio version, or you can just go to our webpage, and of course the link will be in the podcast description too. So today's guest is Judith, and I'm not even gonna try to pronounce her last name because I wanted to ask her that before the interview, and I just realized I forgot to tell me how her last name is pronounced. So I will ask her. And our next guest is also someone who I met at the European Forum. Surprise, surprise. And she was actually the third queen that I was mentioning when I was talking to Ola. And yeah, I guess we met at the same place where I met Ola the first time, and since then we are really good friends. She was she was studying Hungarian literature and language and became a teacher, has a degree in that, and now is studying theology, which is her passion right now, and she's assistant pastor at an evangelical fellowship church, which is following the Methodist tradition. So, welcome, Judith. Please, first, of course, say hello to our listeners and viewers, and also, please, can you pronounce your last name?
Hello, everyone. Sure, I can. So, I'm Judit Gyarfas with Hungarian pronunciation. Yeah.
Exactly, dear listeners and viewers. That's how it's pronounced. Yes. Well, I don't know. Should I try? Do you want me to try?
Yes.
Gyarfas.
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 Yes.
Good.
That's
good.
it.
Okay. I'm getting better. So, yeah, maybe I should start studying languages. I can pronounce names. That's a great step. So, okay, let's dive right in, Judith. And can you tell our listeners and viewers about yourself a little bit more? Maybe something I didn't mention and you want people to know about yourself. What would you tell people? Who are you?
Yeah, it's not an easy question. And I think my journey was kind of like, sometimes I was doing turns in it. So I did study Hungarian language and literature. Actually, first, straight after high school, for a year and a half, I was on English and French major. But then I was not doing so well. I had some mental problems back then, and then I kind of like needed time to heal. It was a time when my parents divorced, So after I had some time to myself and to get to know myself better, I would put it that way, I started to study Hungarian literature, and actually I felt more at home, like reading, because my grandfather from my father's side, he was a writer, and we had like many books at home, and I felt like reading in my own native language and just literature in general was like really when I felt at home. So after graduating and having a degree, I didn't teach literature. I started to teach English because with my family we spent some time in the United States, and that's actually where I learned English, so I could use my knowledge to teach. And I was teaching here in Budapest and also later in Russia. And it was 4 years ago when I had the forum experience, and it was like really something like which put me again into place, like, okay, this is where I need to be and this is my calling. And then I started to study theology. So 3 years ago I started to study theology, and probably I would add besides literature and theology, yes, which you said is my passion, I would probably add like activism, because I also consider myself an activist, and I started 15 years ago in Labris Lesbian Association in Budapest, and that's again a community where I found home, and I also inherited this, I think, from my mother. She's kind of like an activist with her students. She also did some squatting, like went to houses which the government or the municipality of Budapest district wanted to destroy, and she visited her ex-students, squatters, brought them some food. So she was also like, or she still is an activist. So yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that you are a sports lover. You're very sporty. You love basketball. And then you also love dancing. What kind of dancing do you like?
Actually, all kinds of dancing. But when I studied dancing, it was like I did some same-sex dance, ballroom dance. And I really enjoyed that too, especially the Latin dances like cha-cha-cha and rumba or rumba. Yeah.
Wow, so, nice. Nice.
I used to folk dance. Yes, there isn't any same-sex folk dance yet. At least not in Hungary. That I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist. But there's also this tradition coming from Transylvania where you dance in circles, and that's like more a communal thing for me. So I also enjoy that.
Hey, that's one idea that you could start in Budapest. You could start same-sex folk dancing.
Yes. Yeah, actually, yes.
Yeah. Great.
Why not?
Yeah.
Just after the quarantine is over.
Yes. Oh, this is killing us and killing all the activism. I know. It's hard times. So tell us a little bit about your sexual orientation and gender. How do you identify yourself?
Yeah, I identify as woman, and I identify most in regards to my orientation with the label queer, because for me, that's the label, that's the most label-less, But besides that, like, I really like that it denies categorization, like it's fluid. But besides that, what's more important, I really like the history of this word, like how it used to be. It used to have a negative meaning, but after the activists and people in the academic sphere started to use it for themselves, they reclaimed it, and for me, it really has this resisting power. So that's why I identify in regards to my orientation with queer the most, but because it's not like a tangible term at first, so it also depends on the context. So I sometimes introduce myself just as lesbian or gay. So
what about your faith background? We heard that right now you're assistant pastor at the Evangelical Fellowship. But what is your faith background? Is that where you come from?
No. Actually, in my close family, when I was growing up with my parents and sister, we didn't really practice religion. Like, we didn't say grace before meals. We didn't really talk about religion. We talked more about literature, actually. We talked about that a lot. So
it sounds also like really a nice spiritual practice.
Yeah, actually, yes, you're right. And but every weekend, my mother took us to her mother, so to our grandmother, and we spent the Sundays usually here. So I went to Sunday school, and actually we prayed together before going to bed with my sister and my grandmother. And so she was the one who is and was back then a person of faith, and so she was the one who introduced me to Christian faith and to the Reformed or Calvinist tradition. So I became very enthusiastic. I had this confirmation, and I also became very active in the youth group. But it was more like taking things literally, and after a while, it just started to be a narrow-minded place for me, because I felt like this is not where life is, and I want to go out and explore like things. And I remember, like, in the youth group, of course, as teenagers, like, sex was a big topic, and like not to have sex before marriage. And for me, like, that was like, but why not? And my peers didn't really think about things, like, they didn't question things. They just said, okay, because this is what the pastor thinks, we should also believe this. And it was not really like an questioning things or thinking about things. So it was more like, okay, we come together, we sing, but we didn't like think together, and I was missing that part. So I left church at 17, and back then I didn't know I was LGBTQ, or I just thought that I need to explore the world, go outside. And then I didn't go to church for a very long time, so until about the age of, let me think. Yeah, for a very long time ago. 2009, yeah, that was 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, I felt like, okay, it's good, like, I'm a person of faith, but I need some other people too, and to practice other religion, because it's not just something like that's not so important in my life, it's important. So that's when I found Mosaic community, and I started to go there. And yes, as I mentioned, 4 years ago, the forum happened.
Can you explain shortly what Mosaic is?
Yeah, Mosaic is a community. It doesn't belong to any churches. We don't have a pastor, and it's like a very big group. There are about 60 members, and not all of them active, but about 60. And so we have 4 subgroups, and the subgroups get together weekly, and we talk about a certain topic. Most people are Christian here, and we talk about anything actually. So what a member is interested in, that member brings the topic every week, and then we talk about that.
Yeah. Okay, so it's kind of like a Christian ecumenical LGBT group that meets on a regular basis. Probably now it's more online, I guess.
Yes, and it's also open to allies. So most people are LGBTQ, but it's also open to allies. So we have a few members who are allies.
So you said that when you left the church, you still didn't realize your own sexual orientation. Is your story? What is your story about self-discovery and coming out?
Yeah, so when I was active in this church, as I mentioned, I took like things very literally, or if the pastor said something, I also said that, but I didn't really understand why. So I remember this moment, like I was in my teenage years, and we exchanged some, handwritten letters with my classmate about a literature teacher. And I remember I was writing to my friend, like, no, maybe she was writing to me, like, how beautiful this teacher is. And I wrote something like, yeah, she is. And then she asked me, I remember very well, are you a lesbian too? At that time I was like, what? No way. And that all homosexuals go to hell. But I didn't even understand like the words, what I wrote in this letter. I didn't understand. I think I just said what I heard from the pastor preaching. I don't recall this moment when he was preaching this, but I just repeated, and I was like, no way. And then after this denial, I said, like, why and why not? So actually, later I fell in love with my friend who we exchanged letters with. So after denial, then after that came a realization, and I think I was 23 when I could say, I mean, first I said it when I was 17 after I fell in love with my classmate, like, yes, I like women, I love women. But I think at 23 is when I could just, I was like more secure or more definite about it.
And what about coming out? How is your story of coming out? Did you come out to your parents? How was that family?
Yes, so I came out to both of my parents, and with my father it was easier. With my mother, she had her stages, so just like I did with my own coming out, she did as well. I first came out to her when I was 17. Her reaction then was, okay, let's talk about it later. And then the second thing, when I came out to her, I was 20, and she said, okay, but the Bible created man and woman, and they should be together. That's the natural thing. Also, I have many friends who are lesbian, and they're also aggressive. And then the third stage, when she started blaming herself, she said, like, what did I do wrong so that you're lesbian? So she needed time. And I think what really helped her is when I first introduced to her my long-term relationship girlfriend back then. And so I think it helped her because it was not a concept or women liking women, but like, okay, this is my daughter and this is the woman she likes. And actually that was a very touching moment because my girlfriend at that time didn't really have a family, and I asked my mother if she could spend Christmas with us, and then she said yes. So that was the moment, I think, like, she accepted me and she was inclusive and welcoming. So that was my mother's story. And also she had a stage when my parents weren't divorced yet, so we were all living at the same place. She said, okay, but just don't tell your father because he already had a heart attack and he will have another one. So that was also, I think, a stage of my mother. Like, she thought that she would protect my father with this. So for a while I listened to her and I didn't come out to my father, but we talked about me going to same-sex dances, and they all knew, like, I was going to these dance classes, and my father asked, like, and oh yeah, and which boy do you dance with? And actually it was very difficult for me to, like, continue to be in this making up things. And then I said to him, yeah, it's always somebody else, which was true because I always danced with another woman, but in general it was not true. So I had enough after a while, and they divorced and I moved out, and I was living on my own. And then I said, okay, I will need to tell him because I don't like living in lies. And I went to one of the Pride marches, and I didn't put the flag away after, so it was still in my flat. And he came to visit and asked about the flag, like, why is it there? And I said I went to Pride March. And then he asked, like, as a supporter, as an ally, or and then I said, or yes, I am lesbian. And actually what he said, I was just laughing so hard. He said, okay, well, I think all people are born bisexual. And and I was like, okay, why I was afraid of this for so long.
Yeah. It's interesting how sometimes the people that we're most afraid of are actually having the best reactions.
Yes.
Yeah. So one thing that was interesting to me, did I understand it right that your parents weren't that religious?
Yes.
How come that your mother was actually using the Bible or what religion says about? Did you ever find out?
Yeah, because so my grandmother, whom I mentioned, like, she's the daughter. And when she also grew up in a religious tradition, like later, when she married my father, who's not religious at all, I think, and also I discovered that she kind of had the same journey as me. Like, when she felt that the church is a narrow-minded place for her, she left the church as well. But you're right, when we were having this discussion, it was so deeply rooted in her upbringing and everything that she quoted the Bible this way.
Yeah. What about your grandmother? Does she know? And how is she with that?
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure. She doesn't know it from me, that's for sure. But I'm not sure if she knows or not.
So you're not talking about it either way with her?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a pastor. How is it being a queer pastor in Hungary, in the church that you are assistant pastor?
Yes. Well, it's there aren't any out pastors in Hungary. So right now, I'm not so sure I'm a pastor. I mean, I do some pastoral things, but I just realized recently, like, there are many ways to be a pastor. And the problem, I mean, I have this problem with the label pastor because right now I feel like it's I have this pressure, like a pastor should be like perfect, like a pastor is pastor 24 hours and only this way. And to me, it's like, again, what I felt at church when I was 17 is like the world is outside. And if we limit being a pastor to just being a clergy in a church and not being in the world, I can't identify with that label. So right now I'm having problems with the label as pastor is understood in Hungary. Also something separated from activism, which for me is hard to separate. So I'm not sure I call myself a pastor now. But
hey, you are just a queer pastor. You're not just queer with your sexuality, but also with the way you're viewing being a pastor. So I think...
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
That's why I am a pastor. Thank you.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I think that we need, like, we claimed the word queer in a different way and just translated it to the way we like it. So you can just translate the word pastor. Why not? I met pastors who are also activists, so just go for it and reclaim
right.
pastorship if that's something you want to see yourself, or just take another name. I mean, whatever you feel comfortable with. But how is it you are working in this church part-time? How is it? Does the church know that about your queerness? Can you be open? How is that part for you?
Yeah, so when I realized my calling after the forum 3 years ago, and that in order to fulfill my calling, I will need to study theology, I immediately knew that I could not go to the Reformed or Calvinist theology because there was a case of a student who was an out gay person, and after his case, the university had changed its laws or said that anybody who's openly gay cannot become a pastor. So it's clearly written in their regulations. So I was familiar with this tradition because I grew up more or less in my teenage years in this tradition, but I knew I couldn't go there. So I was looking at different homepages at theologies at Lutheran Church and of the Hungarian Evangelical Fellowship. And I really liked that on their homepage it said, like, we don't expect anybody to become evangelical or Methodist or to follow any faith tradition. You can come as you are. Basically, it said you don't need any recommendations from your pastor. You don't need like this confirmation letter, etc. And not even to theology or ministries. And for me, this was like, oh, they're really open and everything. So I chose to study here. And after I started my studies, I came out to the college pastor. There was a Bible study one. I was the only one attending, and I felt like, okay, I will tell her now. And now there's a different college pastor, but back then she was the college pastor, and for her, I was the first one to come out, and she didn't know what to do. So she contacted several people, as she told me later, and then what she did and what was really welcoming is that I not only started to study there, but I also started to attend a local parish or congregation there. And she had this coming out ceremony. The congregation members, the fellowship members came there, and I told my story. Like each month on a certain Sunday, there's a guest coming, and I was the guest back then. And I told my story, and then there was a time for questions, for speaking about it in the congregation. This was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And then, so this is what happened. And what I feel about her is the same thing I told you about my mother, is that she is on her journey. But actually, I'm not the only LGBTQ student. So it's not a big college, but I would say that half of the people are LGBTQ. So it's something very current and something very urgent we need to talk about. And so I'm glad I'm not the only one, but I think I'm the one who always brings this topic to the front to speak about it. Yes.
You would like other people to get engaged, to be more outspoken. Yes. So let's go a little bit back. When you look into your past, you said that you had to leave, or you decided to leave the church because you just felt it was too narrow, not open-minded enough. What do you wish you had from the church back then? What kind of church would you like have had then?
Like a thinking church, and also like there was this kind of like sectarian attitude, like always saying that. And I think that's why I felt like I need to explore the world, because the world was like something outside, which is like the enemy. And we are living in this closed community, and we're judging. There was a lot of judgment going on, like about every little thing, how you dress, so I would change to think more and judge less, and to be open and live in the world more, not to separate yourself from the world.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, very interesting what you said, because I often think about myself growing up in church and just realizing how much of a ghetto it was. You know, it was almost like a separate world. And although, you know, I wasn't going to a Christian school, or how you have it. I mean, you have Christian schools in some countries. In our country, that was not the case. I was growing up in a communist country where, you know, we were just going to church and everything else was run by the government. But it's still interesting how much separated I was, and I didn't realize until I left the church. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting question that churches should ask themselves, how to become a bigger part of the world and not being so separate.
Yeah, I think what you said is also a reason why they became so closeted or closed, because of the communist era. It was the only way to survive. Like, you couldn't really be open, because even the person sitting to you next in the church could be a spy, actually. And there were spies in the church I grew up in. So my grandmother told me like stories like they were having a Bible study here in this house, and then a neighbor from next door knocked like, "Oh, what are you celebrating here?" And like, "What are you doing here?" And of course they couldn't tell, like, we're having a Bible class. "Oh, we're having celebrating someone's birthday." So I think the reason is because of history. I mean, back then it was really the only way to survive, but right now I think the case is different. So after a while, it's counterproductive to become so closeted.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about the whole situation in Hungary, or we talked about it in a separate podcast, and you can find the link at the end of this podcast. I will put it up so you can go and see what it's like to be LGBTQ in Hungary right now, and what the situation is and what's happening there in the Priceless News section. But one thing I always ask all my guests, and I would really like to ask you too, because we like to give other people who are seeing this and listening to this, that they have an idea what helped different people in their process of figuring themselves out, or just combining their sexuality with faith. So what would you suggest to people? What were some things that helped you, or that you think could help other people now while they're figuring things out?
I remember what really helped me is Ellen's sitcom.
Yeah.
I watched it over and over again because I was so afraid to say, like, yeah, I am lesbian or I like women. And this part, when at first she denies it, like I did as well, like she's speaking with this other woman and I said, no way, just go out of this room, and no, I'm not lesbian. And then to the stage where she gets when she's saying it accidentally to the microphone on the airport that I'm gay. Like, what? That helped me a lot. I remember. Also reading, because I really like reading. I read a lot, and I remember going to the library and reading gender studies, or reading queer theory back then. For me, it was also like it changed this narrow-minded focus into something like, oh yeah, we need to deconstruct things, and it's like the traditional roles or gender roles of men and women, how it's just something that society imposes, and finding via social science things. So that also helped me a lot.
Okay, if you have any suggestions, like a book that can be found internationally, it would be great if you could send us the link so we can put it up to our link section, that people can find the book that you like and find some good reading suggestion. So, is there anything else that you would like to add at the end of this interview?
Well, I wish everyone to resist and persist. In these difficult times, it's really hard for all of us to stay sane. So just resist and persist. That's our message.
Thank you, Judith, so much for being part of this podcast and for agreeing to give me an interview and to share your personal story. As I tell every guest, I'm just honored to listen to your stories and be at this place who finds out the first from all listeners and viewers. So thank you, everyone, for watching and for listening. As I said, all the links will be in the podcast description. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and also share this podcast with others. I will remind you, if you want to support this podcast, you can do so by following the link in the podcast description on YouTube or Anchor or on our webpage. So please don't forget about us and become part of this podcast by supporting it. So thank you to everyone again. I'm saying bye, and hopefully we'll listen, or you can listen and watch us soon with another guest. Until then, bye.